Welcome to One Life Church, and thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. My name is Justin, and I'm one of the pastors here. We are a group of people committed to bringing the kingdom of Jesus to earth, one life at a time through intentional relationships. We aim to create environments that nurture family, authenticity, and a culture of investment. We believe that one life can make a difference, and we want to help you do just that. Now, whether you're exploring faith, or you're looking for a new church home, or you're seeking a deeper connection with Jesus, I want you to know that you are welcome here. Before we jump into the sermon today, I want to ask you to do two things for me. Number one, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can follow along with all that God is doing in and through One Life Church. And number two, in the description below, you're going to find a link for onelifechurch.tv. This is where you can learn more about our church and how you can get involved. If you live in the Concord, North Carolina area, I want to invite you to join us in person on a Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. You can plan your visit at onelifechurch.tv. I pray that today's sermon is an encouragement to you as you follow Jesus today and in the days to come.
So we're going to continue talking about Beatitudes this morning. And there are 9 of them. And Beatitudes are broken down into 3 sets of 3. And we are talking about the last one in that initial first 3 sets. And this one is one that should be pretty familiar to everybody. In fact, when I was doing sermon research, I consulted the great theological source, Wikipedia, and they said that it is the most famous of all of the Beatitudes. And if you look at the bottom of the Wikipedia article on it, you can see why. It has shown up in all kinds of places in pop culture. This Beatitude is the title of a song in the musical Little Shop of Horrors. It has been referenced in TV shows like Lost, Community, Firefly, and War of the Worlds. Jay-Z rapped about it. Simon and Garfunkel sang about it. And in a crazy example of like both ends of the spectrum, both Sylvia Plath, that ray of sunshine, and Monty Python have used it in their works. You see, it's like, this is the Beatitude that everybody knows, but it has been reused and used again so many times that the meaning of it has kind of gotten jumbled up in our cultural consciousness. It's to the point where, like, when we read it, what we hear is so far removed from what Jesus' original hearers would have heard so long ago. And of course, this beatitude is, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." So first, let's start with where we are. Let's kind of get a baseline, okay? So when we hear the word meek, what image comes to mind? Someone quiet? Maybe someone kind of mousy? A person that never stands up for themselves? Maybe we think of someone like this inhuman humility, like those secret millionaires that live in a normal house and then anonymously give away their fortune. Or maybe it's just like that kind of like, oh, shucks kind of personality, right? Okay. Now let's think about that second part. For they will inherit the earth. What image does that conjure up? Power, authority, like global domination and conquest? Now let's take those 2 images and stick them together, and that's really, really hard because it doesn't make sense. We can look around the world and see that it doesn't work like that. In fact, I was researching for this sermon, and this is something that I've heard over and over again, but I really wanted some facts to back it up. So I found a research report by Truity, which is like a business research organization. And they released a report in 2019 about how people's Myers-Briggs personality types affect their salary. My fellow introverts, brace yourselves. This study found that introverts make an average of $10,000 less per year than extroverts. And the gap between the highest paid personality type, the ENTJs, and the lowest paid personality type, INFP, which is mine, was about $27,000. Yikes. The study went on to find out that the personality traits that most correlated to higher income, well, the top two by a long shot were ambition and people that are challenging. Introverts are regularly looked over for promotions and raises and leadership opportunities. You see, it is well known in the business world that the meek do not inherit the earth. At least not in the sense that we as a culture have come to understand it. And it's not just the business world that I'm talking about. It's everywhere. You see, we shun meekness and we call it weakness. We give platforms to the loudest and the rudest, the ones who will push everyone aside so that they can get ahead. See, we think that if there's any way we're going to inherit the earth, then we better latch on to whatever power is going to get the job done. We compromise our integrity for notoriety and our compassion for judgment. We call empathy a sin, and we excuse vile speech with, well, they're just telling it like it is. We cheer on those who would bulldoze their way through life, and we celebrate their successes no matter how many people are crushed underneath their selfish ambition. And we do this because we don't want to be the ones that get crushed. We know meekness isn't rewarded, not in real life. And so this leaves us with a couple options when we hear this beatitude spoken by Jesus and a few conclusions that we can come to. Well, we could either think that Jesus is just making an empty promise. This isn't for real. We could say, Jesus is probably a little out of touch with reality. Or we need to adjust our understanding. Now, I think we can all agree that number one is the wrong answer. I mean, this is church. You can trust what Jesus says. And Beatitudes aren't platitudes. Beatitudes are the foundational truths upon which God's kingdom is built. Jesus wouldn't have promised it if he didn't mean it. Okay, well, let's look at number two. What about Jesus's reality? Okay, so Jesus was living in a land that was occupied by Rome, an empire that wasn't exactly known for being humble. Jesus regularly witnessed the way the meek were crushed under unfair taxes, discriminatory laws, and corruption. If anybody understood how the world actually works, it was Jesus. He was not sheltered from oppression. He walked through it daily. So I guess that leaves us with option three. Taking off our 21st century Western lenses and trying on some first century Eastern ones. Well, last week, I asked the question, who are the mourners and what are they mourning? And this week, I want to ask the question, who are the meek? And is meek even really the best word for it? And y'all know how much I love Greek and Hebrew. So instead of saying blessed are the meek, let's look at it this way. Blessed are the praus. Blessed are the ani. Okay, so if Jesus would have been speaking Greek, he would have said, blessed are the praus. If he were speaking Hebrew or Aramaic, it would have been the word ani. Now, that's just not like a fun fact I'm sharing. It's actually important because we can look at the Greek translation of the Old Testament and we can see where the word ani, which is the Hebrew, has been translated praus, which is what Jesus uses in the Beatitude, okay? And by understanding that, we can get a clearer picture of what Jesus' Jewish audience would have received when he said the word meek. Okay, so the first interpretation is, blessed are the afflicted. Blessed are the afflicted. So we see the word ani translated praus in Psalm 76. And this is what it says. From heaven you pronounced judgment, and the land feared and was quiet. When you, God, rose up to judge, to save all the afflicted of the land. So this psalm is talking about how God sees the people who are afflicted, that word ani or praus, by the deeds of the wicked, and God rescues them through his judgment on evildoers. But here's what I want you to pay attention to, though. God is the only one who acts. The afflicted do not join in the fight, nor do they cave to the wicked. The afflicted suffer, but they are seen and they are rescued. Okay, another interpretation could be, blessed are the vulnerable. Blessed are the vulnerable. So another place this specific word shows up is in Job 24. And Job is talking about the wicked man, the wicked people, and what the wicked people do. And he says, they drive away the orphan's donkey and take the widow's ox in pledge. They thrust the needy from the path and force all the poor, so that was that word, praos ani, they force all the poor of the land into hiding. So as these wicked folks are taking donkeys from kids without parents, and they're stealing oxen from widows, they're also looking at the needy on the side of the road, and instead of helping them, they toss them to the side. All of the poor, the ani, the praus, hide from them. These are people who cannot fight back. The orphan, the widow, the poor, the sick, the people who wouldn't dream of inheriting anything, because everything they have gets taken by those who bulldoze right over them. These are just two examples of many. The word for meek in Hebrew often refers to the powerless, the poor, the ones who not only don't get noticed, but are actively kept down. Jesus' listeners would have known this word well. And I kind of wonder what they thought about it. Remember, they are waiting on a Messiah that they believe will conquer their oppressors. They already had groups like the Zealots, the freedom fighters who were willing to resort to violence in the name of nationalism. How on earth is an army of oppressed and vulnerable people going to take back the land? And that is exactly what they were concerned about, the land. Let's look at that second part. Will inherit the earth. Okay, so we don't even have to do Greek or Hebrew here. It's not talking about the earth, okay? It's talking about the earth, like the land that you're standing on, okay? I was reading a commentary by Scott McKnight on this, and he said, I loved it, he said, the people of Israel didn't care two figs about invading Gaul or Italy. They just wanted the land of Israel. You see, the earth just means land. And that would have gotten their attention. You see, don't forget, Jesus was a Jewish rabbi, and he taught like Jewish rabbis. Most of the things that Jesus said have a counterpart in the Old Testament. And in this one, just like last week's beatitude was from Isaiah, this beatitude is from Psalm 37. And it says, commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger, turn from wrath. Don't fret, it only leads to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. I loved what one source I read said about Psalm 37. They were like, Psalm 37 is either really encouraging or really annoying, depending on where you are in the moment. When I read it, it was really annoying, but I get the encouraging part too. Because we don't like to see the wicked succeed. We don't like to see the bad guys win. You see, this psalm was probably written while David was on the run from Saul. So David's not speaking from the comfort of his palace when he's saying this. In this psalm, David is encouraging the people to stop worrying about the wicked people who keep getting richer and keep having successes. Like in Psalm 76, he puts the justice totally on God, writing in faith that God will work it out. Jesus' listeners would have recognized this reference immediately. See, the Zealots wanted to take the land back by force, but Jesus pointed to David, who didn't seize the throne, but waited for God to move. You see, the meek don't conquer, they trust. Jesus' kingdom is not about how powerful you are, how much influence you have, or the stuff you accumulate. There is no gain in that. No. In Jesus' kingdom, the gain is how much you can let go. And that is so backwards. And I get it if you're like, but how does that even work in 2025 America? Have you seen things lately? Listen, I said that Jesus' promises can be trusted, but there is nowhere in the Bible that promises 3 easy steps to inheriting the earth in 6 months or less. It's not there. There's no shortcuts to the kingdom. But I did find something that Scott McKnight said to be really, really helpful as I was wrestling through this. Scott McKnight notes that the literal land was never Jesus' aim. Jesus isn't that kind of Messiah. He wasn't going to establish an earthly kingdom. And he says that himself. He says, my kingdom is not of this world. So he proposes what it could look like to live in the kind of inheritance that Jesus really did promise. Now, I'm going to read what Scott McKnight said, and it is full of $10 words, but then we're going to break it down. Okay, so Scott McKnight says this: the meek choose to absorb unjust conditions in a form of nonviolent, non-retaliatory resistance that creates a calm, countercultural community of love, justice, and peace. All right. So the meek choose to absorb unjust conditions. Jesus' audience was never going to overthrow Rome. They never get the land back. They were never going to stop injustice through force. Nor were they going to stop it by cozying up to Rome and doing whatever they said. But this doesn't mean they needed to adopt a defeatist attitude. Well, there's nothing we can do about it anyway, so we might as well just give up hope. Because that's not the answer either. So if force isn't the answer and defeat isn't the answer, what does it look like to absorb unjust conditions? And I don't think there's any better example I can look at than the example of Jesus. Jesus is one of the only 2 people in the entire Bible who are called meek. The other one is Moses. And Philippians 2, 5-8 tells us exactly what it looked like for him to absorb unjust conditions. And it says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used for his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. First, Jesus willingly cast aside his status. Think about that. He didn't throw his deity around in order to get special treatment. Really, you can't find me a table? Do I need to call my dad? And the thing is, if anyone could have demanded power and privilege, it was Jesus. But instead, he laid it all down. And that is the model of meekness. Not a denial of strength. He never denied who he was. But the refusal to use it for self-promotion. Jesus didn't lose his sense of identity, but he didn't use it to push others down. Instead, Jesus walked in humility. Jesus suffered injustice just like everybody else. Jesus dealt with mistreatment and betrayal. Jesus walked through the worst kind of suffering imaginable, not because he accepted defeat, but because he knew in the end it would be worth it. Now, I want to go into some application on this, but it has to go with the next part: nonviolent, non-retaliatory resistance. Absorbing injustice is not the end of it. We don't do this to be martyrs. Oh, look at how unfairly I'm treated. Look how much I suffer. See, the objective is never to get people to pity you. The objective is to point to God as the only true bringer of justice. Back in February, we took our family to Mobile, Alabama for a big family thing down there. And on the way, I really wanted to stop in Montgomery because our boys had been learning, or our two oldest boys had been learning about the civil rights movement in school. And Montgomery has some really important places related to that. So I wanted them to actually get to see it with their own eyes. And so we visited the church where Dr. King ministered and lived and had a lot of the important meetings for the movement. We went to the state capitol, and our boys stood on the spot where Dr. King gave his speech at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March, which I did not know this, but it was also the same spot where the Confederate President Jefferson Davis was sworn in. And when we were there, we learned about the Selma to Montgomery March. And if you're not familiar, it was about voting rights. And this was about 10 years or so after Rosa Parks and the bus boycott. And so this march was led by young people, students, and faith leaders. Thousands of people, both black and white, were going to march for 54 miles. I didn't realize it was that far. They marched for 54 miles because they believed that everyone had the right to have their voice heard. And we went to this museum that had an awesome video that had these eyewitnesses' accounts of the people that were marching and actually experienced it. And they would have their narration and they would show the pictures and the images of what was going on there. And every single step of the way, these marchers had to display nonviolence in the face of violence. Every mile of those 54 miles, they faced injustice. Just for example, the video showed how, like, when they would come into a town, the police would block the street. They would line up blocking the street, and they would say, you can't march in the road, you have to go on the sidewalks. But on the sidewalk were men with baseball bats and hate in their heart. They were chased with nightsticks and horses. They were tear gassed and shot at, and yet they marched. That is what it means to absorb injustice without giving up or giving in to hate, knowing it is going to be unbelievably tough, but marching anyway. And at one point in the video, it showed the events of Bloody Sunday. And that is when the marchers were brutalized after they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. And this is when John Lewis had his skull fractured, and 67 others were wounded. And while this part of the video was going on and they were talking about it, and it wasn't gratuitous at all, it was very, very compassionate. But our 9-year-old son, Lawson, came up and sat beside me, and he goes, Mom, why are they hurting them? See, he knew about the marches, but he didn't know about what really happened. And I did my best to try and explain it on his level, like what was going on. And as the video went on, I could see the anxiety just building in him, and he goes, Mom, they're not fighting back. Why aren't they fighting back? And I said, it's okay, honey, just keep watching. They're gonna win, I promise. And he was like, how? How can they win if they don't fight back? And right on cue, the video cut to the media coverage of Bloody Sunday. Because what happened is there were photographers there that took pictures of the marchers being brutalized and not fighting back. And those images were shared worldwide. And people were able to see these souls who endured true persecution and absorbed injustice without resorting to violence, nor without giving in and turning back. And when the world saw it, when the world saw their righteous example, they raised their voices in outrage. And 1 week later, the Voting Rights Act was passed. You see, when the meek endure injustice without retaliation and violence, it is a countercultural act of resistance. That kind of strength, the strength to endure and not retaliate, forces the world to confront the injustice. And it invites others to join in God's redemptive work of making things right. So what does it look like for us to make things right? Well, there's that last part of that quotation, a calm, countercultural community of love, justice, and peace. That right there, that's our inheritance. Not political power, not global domination, but a kingdom that belongs to Christ and is shared with us, his co-heirs. We are promised something that is going to last long past presidents and kings, dictators and despots. The powers of this world have no right to our inheritance, and it can never be taken by force. But I want to be clear about one thing. I am not talking about this only taking place after we die. The promise that accompanies this beatitude has to do with earth, the here and now. This is a community we can make right now. The meek inherit the earth when they don't use their position or their resources to elevate themselves, but to serve others and lift others up. The meek inherit the earth when they see a culture that rewards pridefulness and self-ambition and vanity and consumption, and they say, nah, I'm going to do the exact opposite of that. The meek inherit the earth when they join together and commit to creating a community where all are valued as image bearers. And everyone is given dignity and respect and love. You inherit the earth every single time you make it look a little bit more like heaven. Every act that reclaims creation from the curse that started in Eden. And the best part, everyone, from introverts to extroverts, children, adults, rich, poor, black, white, everybody can participate in this work of restoration. Don't discount the power that comes from meekness. It's not weakness. It's the strength to resist and endure the injustice of this world without becoming hardened by it. It is the courage to trust that God's justice is more important than winning. And it starts right now in how we talk to each other, in the way we lift up instead of tear down, in the ways we absorb injustice, not by giving up, by pointing people to Jesus who brings justice that lasts. So let's take Jesus at his word, that we have an inheritance we can claim today. Let's be that calm, countercultural community of love and justice and peace so that when people look at us, they see a glimpse of heaven right here on earth.